Millionaire dad watches Waitress feed his disabled son and changes her life forever. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. We love hearing your stories too. Now stay with us, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness uncovers the deepest truths, and sometimes justice begins with a grilled cheese sandwich. The rain came down in quiet sheets that evening, not in dramatic bursts, but in the kind of steady, soaking drizzle that made the world feel slower, more tired. Lexington Avenue shimmered under the dull, orange glow of streetlights, puddles reflecting warped images of passing cars and worn-down storefronts. The Lexington Diner, a narrow corner joint with flickering neon letters and a single humming radiator, was nearly empty. Only one booth was occupied, a tired old man nursing black coffee and a young woman behind the counter, scrubbing at invisible stains like the action alone might keep the place alive a little longer. Emily Harper moved with practiced ease, wiping down the laminated surface, her faded blue uniform clinging damply to her skin beneath her apron. She had been on her feet since 10 that morning, double shift again, and her lower back ached like it had been carved out with a spoon. But her hands kept moving. They always did. When you stopped, you had time to think, and thinking led to remembering. And she had built her entire second life around never doing that. The bell above the door had already been turned off for closing, but Emily glanced at the clock anyway. Just past 11. She sighed, set the rag down, and turned toward the coffee machine. That was when she saw him. A small boy outside the diner window, hunched over in a battered wheelchair. The wheels were caked in mud, one of them wobbling slightly like it was damaged. The boy's coat was soaked, plastered to his thin shoulders. His hair was dark and messy, his face too pale in the glow of the neon sign. He was holding something, a blanket maybe, but it looked too thin, too worn to be of any comfort. Emily blinked and moved closer to the window. He was not moving, just sitting there, alone, in the rain. She hesitated for a second, then grabbed a towel from the back counter and made for the door. The cold slapped her, instantly biting through the thin fabric of her sleeves as she stepped into the drizzle. She crouched beside the boy, slowly keeping her voice low and soft. "Hey there, sweetheart. What are you doing out here all by yourself?" The boy flinched at first, then looked up. His eyes were wide and blue, not the bright kind of blue, but the washed-out kind that came from too many tears and not enough sleep. "I am waiting for my dad," he mumbled. His voice barely rose above the sound of the rain tapping on the metal awning overhead. Emily looked up and down the street. Nothing. Just the hazy glow of a pawnshop sign across the road, a shuttered pharmacy, and one dark-colored car parked under a tree across the street. But no movement. No one else. She looked back at the boy. "Where is he, hon? Did he say how long he would be?" The boy shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "He said he would be back in a few minutes." Emily frowned. "How long ago was that? I do not know." "A while." Her heart ached in a way she did not like. It reminded her too much of someone else, of another wheelchair, of a kid who used to say the same thing. "Just wait here. I will be right back." Except no one ever came back. "Well," she said, forcing a small smile, "you cannot sit out here in this mess. Come inside with me, okay? It is warm in there, and I just made some soup." The boy hesitated. His fingers clutched the blanket like it was armor, but then slowly he nodded. Emily reached behind the chair and carefully wheeled him into the diner, holding the door open with her hip. The warmth inside hit them both instantly, thick with the scent of butter-melted cheese and cheap coffee. She guided him toward the booth closest to the radiator and draped the towel over his shoulders. He shivered once, then stilled. "My name is Emily," she said, crouching to his eye level. "What is yours?" The boy sniffled and rubbed his nose with the back of his hand. "Noah. That is a strong name, Noah. You hungry?" He nodded a little, his eyes still wary. Emily did not wait for more. She walked into the back, sliced a fresh loaf of sourdough bread, and began making a grilled cheese sandwich the way she used to make it for her brother. Golden crisp and paired with tomato soup from a can she always kept on the back shelf for nights like this. When she returned, she slid the plate in front of him and tucked a napkin into his lap. "This one is on me," she said. "You just focus on eating." Noah took a bite. His eyes widened as the cheese stretched from the bread. "This is the best thing I have ever had," he said, voice filled with something between wonder and disbelief. Emily laughed softly. "That is what I always say. Good food makes the world feel a little less cold." What she did not know was that someone else was watching. Across the street inside the dark-colored car parked under the shadow of an old elm tree, Graham Holt sat still, his hands resting on the steering wheel, unmoving. He had arrived 10 minutes before, already late, stuck on a phone call with his accountant about some licensing dispute in Chicago. He had told Noah to wait by the diner, just for a few minutes. He had done this before. Noah was used to waiting, but as the drizzle turned to rain, something in Graham's chest had twisted. Now, watching the woman inside this stranger in a diner uniform who knelt beside his son and wiped his chin with a napkin like he mattered, he felt something unfamiliar. Shame, guilt, and something else. Recognition. He reached for his phone. "Vanessa," he said when his assistant answered, "I need you to go down to the Lexington diner. Casual, no heels. Do not bring security." There was a pause on the line. "Sir." He clenched the phone. "Find out who she is. The woman feeding my son. I want her name, background, everything. By morning." He hung up. Back inside the diner, Noah was giggling. A quiet, snorting laugh as Emily told him a story about a dog who had snuck into the diner once and scared the fry cook so badly he threw a spatula at the wall. She wiped soup off his chin with gentle fingers. "Messy eater, huh?" Noah nodded, beaming. Emily looked out the window briefly, catching a flicker of headlights. The car was still there, watching. Her smile faded just a bit. Something about the way it sat there, unmoving, made her skin prickle. But she said nothing. She had learned a long time ago not to poke too hard at things that did not concern her. The bell above the door jingled. The woman who entered looked out of place from the moment her foot crossed the threshold. Faded jeans, hood pulled low over blonde hair, sneakers too clean for this part of town. She scanned the diner with one practiced glance and then locked eyes on Noah. "Hey, champ!" "Time to go," she said, crouching beside him with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Noah blinked. "I have not finished my milk." "You can take it with you," she said, reaching for the chair. "Your ride is waiting." Emily's instincts screamed. Something was wrong. She had worked in this place long enough to recognize when people did not belong, and this woman did not belong. "Do you know him?" Emily asked, crossing her arms. The woman's smile twitched. "I am his aunt." Emily turned to Noah. "That true sweetheart." Noah hesitated just a moment too long, then nodded slowly. "I think so. She is here for my dad." Emily crouched down beside him again, whispering, "You okay? You want to go with her?" Noah looked at the cookie still on his plate, then back at her. "I guess I have to." Emily's chest tightened. She did not push. Not here. Not like this. She knew how quickly it could go wrong. Instead, she walked to the counter, pulled a chocolate chip cookie from the jar, and wrapped it in wax paper. She placed it gently in Noah's hands. "For the road," she said. Noah grinned. "Thanks, Emily. You are the best." The woman wheeled him toward the door. Just before stepping into the rain, she turned and looked back. Her eyes were sharp now, cold. It was not a thank you. It was a warning. Emily watched them go, her heart thrumming in her chest. Something was not right. She felt it deep in her bones, and she knew enough not to ignore that kind of feeling. Not anymore. Across the street, Graham Holt stepped out of the car just as the woman approached. Noah was already buckled into the back seat. The woman nodded. "She is sharp. Almost called me out." Graham's jaw tightened. "But she let you take him." "She did not have a choice," the woman replied. "You know how it is. A white woman makes a scene, it is concern. A woman like her makes a scene, it is trouble." Graham said nothing, just stared at the diner, the woman who had fed his son, and the strange ache building in his chest. "By morning," he said quietly, everything on her. Then he climbed into the car and closed the door behind him. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight, leaving behind the kind of silence that made the city feel too big and too still. Emily Harper walked the 6 blocks home in damp sneakers that squelched with every step. Her coat was too thin. Her tips were barely enough to justify the double shift, and her head throbbed with the ache that came from holding everything in all day long. She lived on the 3rd floor of a weathered brick walk-up on West Clay Street in an apartment that smelled permanently of old carpet and someone else's cigarette smoke. The radiator hissed like it was dying. The windows let in every bit of cold air they were supposed to block, and the water in the kitchen sink ran brown for the first few seconds every morning. But it was hers. She had earned it the hard way, and that made it sacred. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind her, with a slow exhale that felt like it carried the weight of an entire decade. She dropped her keys into the chipped blue bowl by the door, kicked off her shoes, and shrugged off her coat. Her socks were soaked through, so she peeled them off and padded barefoot into the tiny kitchenette. One burner worked. The fridge buzzed louder than the television she did not own. She poured herself a glass of tap water and leaned against the counter, eyes closed, trying to push away the feeling that had been crawling up her spine since the woman wheeled Noah away from the diner. That boy's face stuck in her mind. The way he had smiled when she handed him the cookie. The way his eyes had flickered toward the door like he was already bracing for disappointment. Emily had seen that look before. She had seen it on the face of someone she once loved more than anything in the world, someone who never got the warm soup, who never got brought inside from the rain. She rubbed her face with both hands. Not tonight. She would not go down that road tonight. She had done what she could. She had given comfort. That was supposed to be enough. But it did not feel like enough. She was just reaching for the light switch to head to bed when the knock came. It was not loud. Just 3 calm, deliberate raps on the wood. But it froze her in place. No one knocked on her door. Not this late. Not ever. She crossed the room slowly, her heart picking up pace, and stood on her toes to peer through the peephole. A man stood on the other side. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored black coat that looked like it cost more than her entire year's rent. His dark hair was neatly combed back, his face clean-shaven, sharp-cold. His eyes were gray, piercing even through the warped glass. He did not look like he belonged on her street, not on her floor, not in her world. She did not open the door. "Who is it?" She called, her voice steady. There was a pause, then a low, measured reply. Graham Holt. The name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" Another pause. To talk, Emily's grip on the doorknob tightened. The name still did not register, but something in his voice, in the calm authority of it, made her stomach twist. Curiosity battled with every instinct that told her to turn off the lights and pretend she was not home. She unlatched the door but only opened it a few inches, keeping the chain in place. Through the gap she could see his face more clearly now. Expensive coat. No umbrella. Yet somehow he was barely wet. "I do not know you," she said flatly. He nodded once. "No. But you know my son." Emily stared. "Noah," he said simply. Her heart thudded once hard. "You were the one watching," she whispered. "Yes." Her mind raced. The Bentley. The woman with the fake smile. The boy in the rain. This man had sent someone to retrieve his son like a forgotten umbrella, and now he was standing at her door like he had the right. She narrowed her eyes. "You left him out there. I was delayed." A meeting ran long. He said it like it explained everything, like that made it okay. Emily wanted to slam the door, but something held her still. "Why are you here?" He reached into his coat pocket. She tensed, but he only pulled out a thick envelope and held it up. "Because I do not believe in charity. I believe in paying debts." She stared at it, did not move. "I do not need a handout," she said. "It is not a handout. It is a job offer." Now she blinked. "A what?" "I run a company. Holt Innovations. We specialize in medical tech and systems infrastructure. I want you to come work for me." Emily let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You do not know me. I flipped grilled cheese for your kid. That qualifies me to work for your company." Graham's expression did not change. It qualifies you to work with people, and I need someone who knows how to talk to people like they matter. She stared at him through the crack in the door, trying to decide if this was some kind of joke or worse, a test. You think that just because you are rich and guilty, you can throw a wad of money at me and make it all square? I think, he said quietly, that you helped my son when I was not there. That means something. To him. And now to me, Emily's throat tightened. Her eyes dropped to the envelope. She hated how heavy it looked, how official, how tempting. You are serious? I am. She closed the door just enough to unlatch the chain, opened it again this time fully, and let him step inside. The apartment felt even smaller with him in it, like the air had shrunk to make room for his presence. He looked around once, assessing everything without judgment, but with total awareness. She crossed her arms. All right, let us say I believe you. What exactly would I be doing at Holt Innovations making coffee? Holding the elevator, Graham walked to the small table and placed the envelope on it. You would be working directly with me, managing public relations and strategic outreach. We are opening a new wing focused on pediatric care systems. I need someone who can connect with real people. Who knows how to read a room that is not full of suits? Emily narrowed her eyes. You have got an entire floor of Ivy League grads who would stab each other for a job like that. Why me? He met her gaze without flinching. Because they would stab each other for it, and you would give it away to the kid in the rain. The room was too quiet. Emily looked down at the envelope again. I do not want to owe anyone anything. You do not. I am the one who owes. She sighed, picked up the envelope and ran her thumb across the seal. I will think about it. Graham nodded once, then turned toward the door. I will have my assistant send over a clean file in the morning. No rush. But if you are going to say no, say it, knowing you already changed something. She did not ask what he opened the door, stepped out into the corridor, and was gone before she could decide what to feel. The envelope sat on the table like a brick. Emily stared at it for a long time before finally sitting down and breaking the seal. Inside was a full offer sheet. 6 figures, full benefits, relocation stipend, personal assistant support. Her fingers trembled slightly. She did not know yet if she would accept. But she knew something had just shifted. She had seen a boy in the rain, and now a door had opened. She just had to decide if she would walk through it. Emily Harper stood outside the glass-paneled entrance of Holt Innovations, her breath fogging slightly against the morning chill as she looked up at the towering building that shimmered in the muted sunlight. The letters of the company name gleamed across the metal frame above her head, clean and modern and sharp like everything else about the place. She clutched the borrowed blazer tighter around her shoulders, its sleeves a little too long, the shoulder pads a little too square. It had been the best she could find at the thrift store, after spending nearly the entire weekend convincing herself she was not walking into a trap. The envelope had stayed on her kitchen table for 2 days. She had read the offer a dozen times. 6 figures. Medical, retirement, even childcare benefits, though she had no child. Graham Holt had been telling the truth, or at least the paperwork said he was. But what kept her up at night was not whether the offer was real. It was whether she was ready to be something else. Someone else. No one in that office knew her. Not really. And the last time someone had put her name on an official file, it had nearly cost her everything, but still she had walked here. She had stepped off the bus 2 stops early just to gather her courage. She had worn her best thrift store heels, brushed her hair into a low bun, and reapplied drugstore lipstick in the restroom of a coffee shop around the corner. She had looked herself in the mirror and whispered, just go in, just once, just try. She pushed open the door and entered. The lobby was sleek, all glass and marble with high ceilings and hushed voices. A receptionist looked up immediately from behind a curved desk, her expression composed but clearly curious. Emily stepped forward, offering her name. Emily Harper. I have a meeting with Mr. Holt. The receptionist typed something quickly and then nodded. 18th floor. His assistant will meet you. Emily thanked her and moved toward the elevators, conscious of the click of her heels on the polished floor. She tried not to look at the reflections in the mirrored walls, tried not to compare herself to the men in tailored suits or the women in crisp dresses who walked past her without a glance. She reminded herself she had earned this, even if not in the way they had. Especially because not in the way they had. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a corridor that felt colder somehow. Not in temperature, but in tone. Everything was quiet, controlled. The walls were a cool gray. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. A tall woman in a fitted navy dress stood waiting beside a glass door with a tablet in her hand and a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Miss Harper," she said. "I am Vanessa Marlowe, Mr. Holt's assistant." Right this way Vanessa turned before Emily could reply, and Emily followed her through the glass door and down a long hallway lined with framed patents and awards. Each one had Holt's name on it. At the end of the hall, a pair of wide double doors stood open. Vanessa gestured. "He is expecting you." Emily stepped inside. The office was massive, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. A long desk stretched across the room, sleek and dark and mostly bare, except for a laptop, a leather notepad, and a small photo frame turned away from her. Graham Holt stood at the window with his back to her, looking out over the city as if it belonged to him. When he turned around, his expression was unreadable. "You came?" "You asked." He nodded once and gestured to the seat across from his desk. She walked slowly toward it and sat down, crossing her ankles and resting her hands on her lap to keep them from fidgeting. "I do not have much onboarding protocol," he said. "You are not here for orientation. You are here because I believe you can do what others cannot." Emily arched a brow. "Which is?" He tapped the folder in front of him. "This company is about to launch a new division focused on pediatric care support and hospital software for rural health systems. The rollout will require someone who understands real people, families, caregivers, people who do not walk into buildings like this every day." Emily leaned back slightly. "You mean people like me? I mean people who have not forgotten what it is like to need help and not get it." There was a moment of silence between them. The city hummed beyond the glass. Emily thought about the way Noah had looked at her, about the blanket on his lap, about her brother. "And what exactly do you want me to do?" she asked public interface. "On-site evaluations, policy feedback. You will work directly with me. Travel sometimes. Talk to real families. Tell me what they actually need so we can build it right." Emily studied him. "You do not need me for that. You could hire a consultant, I could, but consultants do not care. You do." She felt those words settle in her chest like weight, heavy but not unwelcome. She looked down at the folder he pushed toward her. It was the same one from the envelope, just printed again. She opened it slowly, scanning the first page again. Salary, title, expectations. "And why are you really doing this?" she asked, not looking up. "Because I fed your son, because you treated him like a person when no one else would, because you made him laugh, and because he asked me if he could see you again." Emily blinked. "He asked for me." Graham nodded. That was all it took. She closed the folder and met his eyes. "I will try it. No promises. No long-term commitment." "Understood." She straightened her blazer and walked to the door. Just before she left, she turned back. "But if I find out you are using me for some kind of image polish or guilt project, I am gone." Graham's lips curved into the smallest ghost of a smile. Fair enough, Vanessa was waiting outside, expression unreadable. She offered Emily a tablet with a company badge and some digital paperwork. "We will get your credentials set up by tomorrow. Welcome aboard." Emily accepted it with a nod, but her gut told her that welcome meant something different here, like a chess piece being placed on a new board. As she rode the elevator back down, her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. She looked like someone she did not fully recognize. Not the diner girl. Not the woman who had packed her life into a backpack after her release. Not the sister who had spent years blaming herself for not being enough. She looked like a woman standing on the edge of something terrifying, and she was still standing. When she stepped back onto the sidewalk, she breathed in deep. The The city felt louder now, busier, like it was moving around her instead of past her. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and scrolled through the call history. She found the last number she had memorized before she stopped making calls entirely. A name popped up. Mrs. Wilson, her brother's old caseworker. She hit call. When the voice answered, she spoke clearly. "Hi, this is Emily Harper. I am trying to track down some records from my brother's care facility. From about 10 years ago. I just started working at a company that might have had something to do with its closure, and I need to know the truth." She hung up before she could change her mind, because Emily had just walked into the lion's den, and if she was going to stay, she would not just survive it, she would learn everything about it. From the inside out. Emily Harper arrived at Holt Innovations early on her second day, though early felt like the wrong word in a building where people seemed to have been working since dawn and already looked like they were running behind. She had taken the bus again even though her new badge came with parking privileges. She did not own a car. She still felt the weight of the thrift store blazer on her shoulders, even if she had upgraded to a pair of flats that did not make her feel like she was pretending to be someone else. She carried a notebook, a cheap pen, and her questions. Inside the elevator, she stood silently beside a man in a dark suit who did not look at her. A woman in heels and a gray pencil skirt stepped in behind them, nodded at the man, ignored her. The elevator chimed softly with each passing floor, and Emily felt her stomach tighten just a little more each time. She reminded herself that she did not come here to impress anyone. She came for answers. She came for the truth. Vanessa Marlowe met her in the hallway, again tablet in hand, eyes sharp. "Miss Harper," she said without emotion, "follow me. Today you are shadowing the project design team for our pediatric rollout. You will be observing meetings, reviewing client briefs, and attending a planning session with Mr. Holt at noon." Her voice made it sound less like an invitation and more like a test. Emily nodded without a word. They walked down a corridor of glass-walled offices and into a large meeting room where a team of 6 people sat around a white conference table, eyes on their laptops. Charts and diagrams glowed on the screen at the far end of the room. One of the men looked up, offered a quick smile. "You must be the new advisor." "Emily Harper. Right, I am Nolan. I run the systems integration side of things." Emily shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. He gestured for her to sit. "We are reviewing the proposed implementation plans for the rural network pilot. Have you had a chance to review the Orion contract I have?" she said, flipping open her notebook. "And I have questions." Several heads turned. Vanessa remained standing, unreadable. Nolan raised an eyebrow, but motioned for her to continue. Emily tapped her pen against the page. "The Orion contract includes a provision that allows third-party vendors to manage the software's deployment in regional clinics. But those vendors are not subject to the same labor and privacy policies Holt Innovations requires of its own employees. That seems like a gap." A pause stretched across the room. One of the other team members, a woman named Priya, frowned. That clause was flagged last quarter, but legal approved it. Emily met her gaze. Just because legal signed off does not mean it is ethical. The last time a facility like this got handed off to third-party vendors without oversight, it ended with kids in understaffed clinics and data breaches no one took responsibility for. Nolan leaned back in his chair. "You have a background in healthcare regulation." "No," Emily said evenly. "I have a background in watching people fall through cracks no one thought were their job to patch." Another silence. Then slowly Nolan nodded. "That is a fair point. We will flag it for redline review." Emily glanced at Vanessa, who said nothing, but her eyes said everything. By the time the meeting ended, Emily had filled 5 pages of notes and underlined half a dozen names. Some of the team had warmed to her, others still looked at her like an experiment. But none of that mattered. She had been heard, and she had seen something. Afterward, she made her way to the top floor where Graham Holt's office looked out over the city like a quiet fortress. He stood at the window again, but this time when she walked in, he turned immediately. "You were right," he said, without preamble. "Noah has not stopped asking when he gets to see you again." Emily allowed herself a small smile. "He is a good kid. He is a better kid than I am a father." She tilted her head. That's supposed to make me feel better? He smiled faintly. No, just honest. Sit down, she did. He passed her a folder. That is the revised implementation plan. Your edits are included. So is the Orion clause. Red line. Emily opened the folder and skimmed the first page. The clause had been marked for review, flagged with a full audit request. You actually listened. You actually made sense. She looked up at him. And if I start asking more questions, then I hope you keep asking the right ones. She hesitated. I want to see the files from 10 years ago, specifically the internal memos about the Mercy Ridge facility closures. Graham's face went still. That was not part of the agreement. It was not, Emily said quietly. But I am asking now. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood across the room and opened a drawer behind his desk. He pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times, then handed it to her. You will not like what you find. I already do not like what I remember. She took the tablet and scrolled. The files were clean. Too clean. One folder contained a financial report that referenced budget cuts, facility outsourcing, vendor disputes. Another held a memo signed by a name she recognized. Not his, but someone from his board. Her fingers trembled slightly. This signature, she said. This person signed off on the cuts that led to the shutdown. Yes. Do they still work here? He hesitated. He nodded once. Then I want to talk to them. That is not your role. It is now. He said nothing for a long time. Then finally he spoke. You are not here for vengeance. Emily, no, but I am not here for silence either. They sat in silence again, the city stretching out behind them like a living thing. Eventually he reached for the tablet, locked the screen, and set it aside. I will arrange the meeting. But be careful. This company has people who do not like being reminded of their mistakes. Especially by someone who was never supposed to be in the room. Emily stood. Then maybe they should stop making them. She turned and walked out, not waiting for permission. The hallway outside felt colder somehow, but her spine felt straighter. She had spent years waiting, years surviving, years believing that no one would ever hear her voice again unless she was screaming through locked doors. Now she was walking through them instead. At her desk, Vanessa appeared with a new file. A note attached. Meeting rescheduled for 3 o'clock. 4th floor, executive wing. Emily took the file. She did not thank her, because now the real work was beginning. And the people behind those doors were about to remember her name, not because she wanted revenge, but because they owed the truth, and she had waited long enough to collect it. Emily Harper stood in front of the frosted glass door on the 4th floor, clutching the file folder so tightly her knuckles had turned white. There was no name on the door, no gold lettering, no etched title to tell her who she was about to face. Just a small security panel and the buzz of overhead lights. Her reflection stared back at her hazy and tired lips, pressed into a line, and eyes steady with the kind of focus that had once gotten her through holding cells and courtrooms and shelter check-ins. She reached forward and pressed the intercom button. A buzz answered her, followed by the quiet click of a lock disengaging. She pushed the door open. The office inside was a stark contrast to the glass and chrome aesthetic of the rest of Holt Innovations. Dark wood panels lined the walls. A heavy desk stood at the far end, stacked with neat folders and a brass lamp that cast a golden halo on everything it touched. The man behind the desk did not rise. He was in his 60s, maybe older, with silver hair combed back and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. He glanced up when she entered, and the corner of his mouth tugged downward slightly, as if her presence was an inconvenience he had been warned about but still did not welcome. "You are Emily Harper," he said. His voice was dry, clipped, the kind that made people stand straighter without thinking. "That is right. Have a seat." She remained standing for a moment longer, then lowered herself into the leather chair across from him. She did not offer her hand. He did not ask for it. "My name is Malcolm Reed. I sit on the executive board. I oversee legal compliance and facility management, among other things. You asked to speak with me regarding the closure of the Mercy Ridge Care Center. Emily nodded once. And your relationship to that facility. My younger brother lived there. He was disabled. He died not long after the center lost its funding and was shut down. Malcolm Reed blinked, then set his pen down carefully beside a legal pad. I am sorry to hear that. Are you? He paused. I am sorry for your loss. Whether or not you believe I had a personal hand in the outcome is beside the point. Emily opened the folder in her lap and pulled out a copy of the memo she had found. Your signature is on the cost restructuring recommendation, the one that led to the third-party outsourcing of the medical care staff. That transition failed. My brother's medication regimen was interrupted. He died within 2 weeks. Malcolm leaned back slightly, his fingers steepling in front of him. I remember the case. Not the patient, but the memo. There were over 200 pages of legal filings, budget forecasts, and regulatory loopholes. The state withdrew matching funds. Our company chose to restructure to prevent further financial losses. You mean you chose to save money and let the rest become someone else's problem? He exhaled slowly, as if the conversation itself were something beneath him. Miss Harper, we make decisions here based on data, not emotion. The loss of that facility was unfortunate, but we are not responsible for every downstream failure that occurred once we removed ourselves from the contract. That is why we have legal boundaries. You know this. She felt her chest tighten. Her fingernails dug into the manila folder. My brother's name was Benjamin. He was 9 years old. He liked puzzles and strawberry yogurt and hated thunder. He trusted that someone would take care of him when I could not. But you decided he was too expensive. Malcolm remained silent. And now you sit here behind a locked door without a nameplate, telling yourself you are not responsible. That you followed the data. That you protected the company. That is exactly what I did. She stared at him. You do not even hear yourself, do you? He adjusted his glasses. What exactly do you hope to gain from this conversation? The truth. The truth. Miss Harper is complicated. No, she said quietly. The truth is simple. You chose profit over people. And now you are still here, still making those choices. The only difference is now I am sitting across from you. He leaned forward. And what do you intend to do? March into the boardroom and demand a moral accounting, publish an expose, sue us? You are an employee now. This conversation does not change that. She stood slowly. You are right. I am an employee, which means I have access now, which means I get to ask the questions people like you have been avoiding for years. And I will not stop until the people who made those choices look me in the eye and answer for them. He looked up at her with a flicker of something she could not place. It might have been surprise. It might have been fear. This company was built on the back of decisions like mine, Miss Harper. You start pulling threads and the whole thing unravels. Then maybe it should. She turned and walked to the door. Her hand was on the knob when he spoke again. Be careful. You are not the first to come in here thinking righteousness makes you untouchable. Most of them do not last long. Emily looked over her shoulder. I have lasted through worse than anything behind this door. You should be more worried about the fact that I am still standing. She left without waiting for a reply. Outside the hallway felt brighter, cleaner, but the buzz in her ears remained. Back on the top floor, she found Graham's office door open. He looked up from his desk as she entered. How did it go? He asked. As expected. He does not think anything is his fault. He thinks the system works just fine. Graham leaned back in his chair. And what do you think? I think the system works exactly the way he wants it to. And I think we either change it or we burn it down. His eyes narrowed slightly. And you plan to do that from inside the building. I plan to do it from wherever they do not expect me to be. He smiled faintly. Then you are in the right place. Emily stepped closer, her voice lower. Now I want you to back me. When I start pulling on those threads, I want to know you will not let them hang me out to dry. Graham met her gaze. If you are willing to fight for the truth, I will stand with you. Then we have a deal. They shook hands. As Emily walked out of the office, she passed Vanessa in the hallway. Vanessa paused, eyes flicking to the edge of the file still tucked beneath Emily's arm. "You are going after Reed," she said quietly. "I already did." And he blinked first. Vanessa studied her for a long moment. Then, almost too quietly to be heard, she said, "Good." Emily kept walking. She had entered Holt Innovations through a side door. She had fed a boy in the rain. She had accepted a job from a man who owed her nothing. And now she was pulling back the curtain on everything they thought she would never find, because she was not just here for a paycheck, she was here for the truth. And she was just getting started. It was just past 6 in the evening when Emily Harper sat alone in the empty conference room on the 17th floor of Holt Innovations. The long glass table stretched before her like a runway lined with sleek black chairs that had been wiped clean and perfectly angled by the janitorial staff who passed through like ghosts once the day shift ended. The lights above hummed softly. Outside the tinted windows, the city had begun to dim into twilight office buildings bleeding gold against the falling dusk. But Emily was not watching the skyline. She was staring at the folder in front of her, the one she had not let go of all day. Inside were 3 sets of internal memos, each dated within 2 weeks of the Mercy Ridge closure 10 years ago. 2 of the signatures matched board members who still held voting power. 1 signature belonged to Malcolm Reed. The last was unsigned but initialed in the corner with 3 letters she had never noticed before. VJM. That was what drew her here now. That, and the quiet voice in her gut that had grown louder with every page she turned. Something about these memos did not line up. The phrasing, the timestamps, the rushed approval. It felt like a curtain had been yanked down and then rehung just enough to cover the mess behind it. She had made copies of everything. Not just printed copies, but digital scans stored securely on a flash drive tucked deep in the lining of her jacket. She did not trust company servers. She barely trusted the chair she was sitting in, but she was not scared anymore. Just alert, focused, determined in the way that only someone who had already lost everything could be. The sound of the door clicking open behind her was not loud, but it made her sit straighter. She turned slowly to find Graham Holt stepping into the room, his coat still damp from whatever errand had pulled him away earlier. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from long hours, but the kind that came from years of carrying the weight of choices too complicated to fully justify and too costly to walk back. He sat across from her without a word and folded his hands on the table. "You wanted to see me," he said simply. Emily slid the folder across to him. He opened it, eyes scanning the pages with the efficiency of someone used to signing things without reading them line by line. But this time he did read. She watched his brow crease. His mouth pressed into a tight line. "You see it?" she said. He nodded once. "I see it." The unsigned memo. The third-party vendor approval. The backdated compliance check that never actually occurred. This was not just negligence. It was something else. "You think this was intentional?" he asked. "I think someone wanted it buried, and I think they used the policy as a cover to shift liability away from Holt Innovations." Graham closed the folder and leaned back. "And what do you plan to do about it?" Emily's voice was steady. "I want you to help me get those records unsealed. The ones tied to the vendor payments. If we can prove they diverted resources or falsified care reports, we can expose the chain of decisions that led to those deaths. Not just Benjamin's. All of them. That will not be easy. I did not come here for easy." He studied her for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "Do you know what happens when we do this? If this goes public, the board will panic. Your shareholders will pull back. Your name gets dragged through every headline. And yours?" She nodded. "I am ready. You will lose your job. Then I will lose it. Doing something that matters." A silence settled between them, but it was not a tense one. It was a silence of decision of consequence, of 2 people standing on the edge of something much larger than either of them could fully predict. Finally, Graham reached into his pocket and slid his keycard across the table. There is a secure archive on the lower level. Red-tagged files. Internal only. Most people do not even know they exist. Vanessa does. She can get you access. Emily did not touch the card. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked. He looked her in the eyes. Because when I watched you feed my son, I saw someone who still believed people were worth saving. And I realized I had not looked at the world that way in a very long time. Maybe never. She picked up the key card, then let's start proving it. That night, Emily returned home to her apartment and locked the door behind her with more care than usual. She pulled out the flash drive and backed up the scans again onto her old laptop, encrypting the folder with a password she had not used in years. It was the name of the street where she and Benjamin had last lived together. She made tea, but did not drink it. Her nerves were humming and sleep was not even a consideration. By 10 the next morning, she was in the archives. Vanessa met her outside the door and said nothing as she swiped her card and let her in. The room was dimly lit and smelled faintly of dust and cool metal. Shelves lined the space from floor to ceiling, each labeled by fiscal year and department. It took Emily nearly 2 hours to find the box she was looking for. When she did, her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled it down. Inside were ledger sheets, payment logs, vendor approval forms, but also notes, scribbled margins, handwritten adjustments. Some pages had been corrected with whiteout. Others had arrows pointing to alternate accounts. She flipped one page over and found a sticky note still clinging to the back. It was initialed VJM. Emily froze. That was not a board member. That was not a legal representative. That was Vanessa Marlowe. She stared at the paper for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Then she heard the soft creak of the archive room door behind her. She turned. Vanessa stood in the doorway. Arms crossed. Her face unreadable. I figured you would find it. Eventually she said, "You knew Vanessa?" Nodded. "I was a junior compliance officer back then. They promoted me the month after the cuts were approved. I signed the vendor paperwork, not realizing what they were hiding. By the time I did, it was too late. My name was already on it. You buried it. I tried to fix it quietly. I requested a re-audit. They shut it down, told me to get in line or get out. I chose the former. I told myself it was survival, that I could do more good from the inside. But I have been sleeping with that decision ever since." Emily's voice was sharp. "And now you are inside. And I think you can finish what I could not." They stared at each other across the rows of files and forgotten numbers. "Then help me," Emily said. Not quietly, not in the shadows. "Really help me." Vanessa nodded once. "I will." Later that day, Emily stood at the edge of Graham Holt's private meeting space folder in hand, Vanessa at her side. Graham had called an emergency board session. The room was full, suits, pens clicking, coffee cups steaming. Malcolm Reed was there too, seated at the far end, his face like carved stone. Graham stood at the head of the table and nodded to Emily. "You are up." She stepped forward, unflinching. She placed the folder on the table and began to speak. 10 minutes later, the room was silent, because the truth had finally landed, and no one could unhear it now. The moment Emily Harper finished speaking, the boardroom fell into a silence so dense it seemed to hang in the air like fog. No one shifted. No one scribbled another note or sipped their coffee. Even the digital clock on the far wall seemed quieter. The final document she had laid on the long table still rested open, its pages, revealing payment trails, altered vendor ledgers, compliance memos, and that one yellow sticky note with the initials VJM that had opened the floodgates. Graham Holt stood beside her, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Vanessa stood farther back near the frosted door, her arms crossed as well, but her eyes fixed on the men who now found themselves without a single place to hide. Across from them sat Malcolm Reed, his back ramrod straight in his leather chair, one hand resting lightly on a stack of folders that had lost all meaning in the span of 15 minutes. His expression remained carefully blank, but Emily could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tick of his finger, tapping silently against the cover of a closed file. One of the younger board members cleared his throat as if attempting to summon the courage to speak. When he did, his voice was dry and cautious. "So you are saying the financial shortfalls from a decade ago were not shortfalls at all? That the numbers were altered, that compliance was falsified?" Emily nodded. "Yes. Not only altered, but redirected. The funds never disappeared. They were rerouted through shell vendor accounts and used to subsidize other acquisitions under different divisions. And you can prove this. I just did. Another voice spoke. An older man with wire-rimmed glasses who had been in the room since the beginning. What do you expect us to do with this? Emily stepped forward slightly. You expect me to say, I want resignations. I do not. Not yet. I want public accountability. I want a full internal review. I want every facility affected by those vendor transitions to receive restitution. I want a new oversight committee led by people who understand what happens when decisions are made on spreadsheets instead of hospital beds. And I want every family that lost someone because of your greed to get a formal apology. Malcolm finally spoke. His voice was calm. You have no authority to demand any of that. Emily's gaze locked on his. No, but I have the truth, and I have something else you were not counting on. I have Graham. All eyes turned to Graham Holt, who had remained silent up until that moment. He stepped forward slowly, his voice even. When I brought Emily Harper into this company, I did so because I believed she had insight we lacked. What I did not realize was that she also had something else we had all lost, somewhere along the way, a sense of moral clarity. He turned slightly, looking at the board as a whole. You are right, Malcolm. She has no authority, but I do. Effective immediately, I am authorizing an internal audit led by Vanessa Marlowe. Every file, every vendor, every decision tied to those closures will be examined. Any employee or executive found to have knowingly participated in the falsification of records will be suspended pending legal review, and any family affected will receive a formal statement of responsibility signed by me. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Chairs shifted. Some members leaned forward in protest. Others looked away in quiet shame. But none of it moved Emily. She stood still in the center of the storm, no longer the outsider, no longer the diner waitress with a past. She was now the catalyst. And they knew it. Malcolm stood. You are making a mistake. You are setting precedent that will open this company to years of lawsuits and millions in losses. Investors will pull out. You will be finished. Graham's voice did not rise. Then let them pull out. I would rather lose $1 million than keep profiting off the backs of dead children. Vanessa stepped forward, then tablet in hand, eyes sharp. Legal has already begun preparing a communications framework. I will have statements ready by end of day. The files are already backed up. This is happening. Malcolm stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You knew about this. I was part of it. I buried it. And now I am unearthing it. You do not get to shame me for digging up what you killed. He said nothing more. Emily turned to Graham. You really going to follow through with this? He nodded. Once, I am not going to ask you to stay on. I am going to ask you to lead it. Emily blinked. Lead it. The task force, the accountability initiative, the rebuild. You are the only one who can. You earned this. The air in the room shifted, not from the men seated at the table, but from something deeper, something unspoken. A recognition of power realigned. Emily let out a breath, one that felt like it had been caught in her chest since the day Benjamin died. Then we do it right. We do it all. Later that night, long after the boardroom had emptied and the company building had gone mostly dark, Emily sat alone in her small apartment, legs curled beneath her on the couch, the flash drive still in her hand, the same one she had clutched when she first walked into that towering building with a borrowed blazer and a gut full of fear. She thought of Benjamin, of the hospital bed he never left, of the days she could not visit, of the cold sandwich she once brought that he never got to finish. She had carried that weight for so long it had become a part of her spine. Now she had laid it down, not in grief, in justice. Her phone buzzed beside her. A new message. From Noah. Holt, hi, Miss Emily. Dad says you are like a superhero. I think you are more like a detective. But either way, I miss grilled cheese. She smiled and typed back, next Saturday. My diner. You bring your appetite. I will bring the cheese. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. Outside her window, the city kept moving. But inside her, For the first time in a long time, something had finally come to rest. Not because the fight was over, but because she had proven she could win. And now she was just getting started on what came next. Saturday morning arrived soft and cool, with a sky streaked pale blue and lavender as the early sun cast its sleepy warmth over the streets of the city. The Lexington diner looked the same as always from the outside, its chipped red door, its faded neon sign humming faintly in the window, and the smell of bacon and toast curling through the air even before the bell above the door rang. But inside something felt different, something felt whole. Emily Harper stood behind the counter apron, tied hands moving with the ease of someone who had come full circle. She had been up since 5 in the morning making extra grilled cheese sandwiches, checking and rechecking her homemade tomato soup, and laying out the old photos she had found in a shoebox beneath her bed. Most of them were of Benjamin smiling crookedly beside puzzles and hospital beds, his face always too thin, his eyes always too bright. She had placed them in a simple wooden frame near the register. At exactly 9:15, the diner door opened and Noah Holt rolled in with a giant grin on his face and a light blue hoodie zipped up to his chin. Behind him was Graham Holt, dressed far less like a millionaire than usual in jeans and a black pullover, his hands in his pockets, and a soft expression on his face that looked remarkably like peace. Noah wheeled straight to the counter, his eyes already locked on the sandwich plate warming under the heat lamp. "You promised grilled cheese." Emily grinned and grabbed a plate. "I promised the best grilled cheese this side of the river. And you are about to find out I keep my promises." He clapped his hands once with delight as she slid the plate in front of him. Graham sat at the booth across from him, watching the two with quiet amusement. Emily poured a cup of coffee and brought it to him without needing to ask. He took it with a grateful nod. "This place has charm," he said, glancing around. "This place is held together with duct tape and prayer," she replied. "But yes, I suppose it has charm." They sat in companionable silence for a while, Noah happily eating his sandwich and slurping soup while Graham sipped his coffee and watched Emily move around the counter with practiced grace. When the breakfast rush began to thin and the booths emptied, Emily slid into the seat across from Graham, her apron still on her hands, folded loosely on the table. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Graham set down his cup. "Now the audit goes public. The new oversight board takes effect. The families will be notified by next week. Legal is bracing for pushback, but the messaging has already gone out. You will be getting press requests starting Monday." Emily's eyebrows lifted. "Press requests. People want to hear from you." The woman who walked into the building with nothing but the truth and left with the company turned upside down. "They want your story." She shook her head. "I am not interested in being anyone's headline. That is what makes you the only one I trust to tell it." She stared at him, the weight of it all landing softly now like snow instead of stone. She had set out to expose the truth, and she had. But now came the part no one talked about. What you did after the spotlight passed. What you built with the rubble you unearthed. "There is something else," Graham said after a moment. "I figured there would be. I want to fund a new project. A community health center. In your brother's name. Focused on transitional care for kids with complex needs. Especially the ones who have no one to advocate for them." Emily blinked. "That is a lot more than a memorial plaque." "It is not a plaque. It is a promise." She felt her throat tighten. She looked down at her hands. Benjamin would have liked that. "Then let us make sure it is something worth his name." A week later, Emily stood in front of a row of microphones she never asked for, wearing a navy blazer and a white blouse, the flash of cameras flickering in her peripheral vision as she addressed a crowd of reporters outside Holt Innovations. She spoke not about the scandal, but about the future, about care, about responsibility, about the kind of leadership that remembered the names of the people it served. She mentioned Benjamin only once. That was enough. Everyone who needed to understand would understand. She declined offers to write books, turned down the morning talk shows, but she said yes to the partnership Graham proposed. Together they launched the Harper Holt Foundation. Its mission was simple: make sure no one fell through the cracks again. That funding decisions were made with faces in mind, that numbers never replaced names. The first health center opened 3 months later in a building that used to be a shuttered private clinic on the edge of the city. Now it had wide ramps, soft lighting, and artwork donated by local kids. Emily kept a photo of Benjamin on her desk. Graham came by often, sometimes with Noah, sometimes alone. He helped with the boring things like grant paperwork and zoning ordinances. She handled the people, the stories, the voices that needed someone to say yes. On the 6-month anniversary, Noah rolled into her office with a wrapped box in his lap. "For you," he said, "from me and Dad." She opened it carefully and found a silver nameplate engraved with words that made her breath hitch. Emily Harper, Director of Legacy and Light. She looked at Graham, who stood quietly in the doorway, hands in his pockets again, that same peaceful expression on his face. "You did this," she said softly. "No, you did. I just helped open the door." That night after the center closed, she walked outside into the cool evening air, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. The city stretched around her, full of people who would never know her name and never need to. That was the way she liked it, because this had never been about recognition. It had been about doing something that mattered. She sat on the bench just outside the main entrance beneath the new sign bearing Benjamin's name. The lights glowed gently above her, and for a long while she just sat there in the quiet. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from Noah. "Can we have grilled cheese tomorrow? Also, I told someone at school my friend used to work in a diner, but now she runs the whole city. Is that true?" She laughed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She typed back, "Close enough." The stars blinked above her, soft and distant. The building behind her hummed with promise. And in that moment, Emily Harper knew this was the kind of legacy that lasted. Not because it was loud, but because it never forgot to listen. Thank you for walking this journey with us. Sometimes justice does not come in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a diner at midnight, in the hand that feeds a forgotten child, in the voice that refuses to stay silent. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. We read every word. And if you believe in stories that uplift, that speak of redemption, courage, and the power of one voice, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Your next emotional journey is just one click away. Tap the video on your screen now. We promise it is one you will not forget. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.